hard one. Like I couldn't really tell you what I did 3 weeks ago, but I could tell you every time as a kid you sit in the gutter waiting for someone to turn up to something that they never have. But he's a lot of fun, it's good to have him around, but yeah, that can very easily sort of become what you're known for and who you are. And he said something to me which stuck, and to this very day, he said, you know, when your reason why is bigger than your reason to quit, you'll never quit. I'm not trying to be the greatest athlete in the world, but I want to be a warrior who's never going to give up. And that's the thing I want to inspire to other people. I know it's going to, end of the day, it's going to come down to want, and I want it so much more than it's ever going to hurt me.
G'day, I'm Anthony Deep. I've happened to know this bloke for a number of years. I've seen him run over, through and around plenty of players on a rugby field. Maybe his biggest run ever coming up, Brisbane to Sydney. Lachy, it's great to have you here with us today. How's
the introduction from DJ? Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I think the biggest thing, it was mainly running around a lot of people, not through a lot of the big Tongan boys, but I think the biggest thing for me is the running for change part, is being able to hopefully change people's perceptions of themselves and want to create positive change in their life. That's what means a lot to me.
Tell us a little about what's actually going into this. So you're running Brisbane to Sydney over a number of days. Give us a bit more insight into what you're actually going to be doing in that time.
So the plan is FKT, so fastest known time of Brisbane to Sydney. So it currently stands at 11 days, 7 hours. Shout out to Joe Ward, coming for you. The plan to go for the record is, one, to hopefully get eyes on the run, but also to show people that, you know, to really reach for the stars and try and scrape and burst through their ceiling, their potential. I want to try and do the run in 10 days, so it'll end up being about 100K a day and be about 1,000 Ks. So, you know, every day is going to be waking up knowing that I get to listen to my feet tapping on the road and the birds and the bees, and I've also got to run 100K, but I get to do it knowing that, you know, every step I'm taking is in the right direction for myself, but hopefully the right direction for other people to want to believe in themselves more and more by seeing someone push the boundaries of their own limitations.
So when are you doing the run?
In May. So we're still deciding on the days. It's going to be probably mid-May, but we're looking at weather patterns because we don't want to, if we can avoid running into a 50K headwind, that'd be great. But we're looking at the middle of May, but the dates will be announced very soon.
Okay, so it's really going to depend on how the season looks. And I guess you're saying you want to do it in 10 days, but there's no real fixed time frame. Like you can start May 1st, you could start May 21st if you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. Look, you want to try and be a little bit open to the weather patterns. The weather should be nice in May, but if you can avoid the 50K headwinds, that'd be great. But at the end of the day, she's happening either way. So,
because I imagine trying to run on, say, a wet road is going to slow you down compared to running perfect, you know.
Definitely. But also if you're trying to run on a very hot day, it's going to sap a lot of energy. So, look, ideally the weather pattern's going to be nice, but I mean, for me, it's not really going to bother me what it's going to be. The more adversity, the better, because I kind of like it when my back's up against the wall. How
did you pick such a big task? Like, Brisbane to Sydney is arduous enough in a car. I mean, on a train, on a plane even, it can be uncomfortable, you know, that long. Why run it?
I mean, to be fair, I just sort of picked Brisbane to Sydney out of a hat. There wasn't any meaningful thing behind it, but
you wouldn't have even gone Gold Coast, save yourself a few kilometres there.
Would have never left the Goldie if I went there, but I think it just comes down to, like I said, trying to push the boundaries and burst through my own ceiling of limitation. So, you know, I've only been running for 2 years now. I started running the back end of 2021, and I just feel like that for me, I know my limitations pretty well. That is definitely at the top end of them, but I know it's going to, end of the day, it's going to come down to want, and I want it so much more than it's ever going to hurt me. So, you know, each day, doesn't matter how I'm going to wake up, I know I'm going to end the day having done what I've wanted to set out to achieve. That's what makes it easy in my mind to reconcile the idea of trying to run 1,000 kilometres. It's not easy to explain to people, but it's easy to reconcile.
It's a massive task ahead of you. How have you been preparing for it?
So the idea sort of came to me like probably almost the start of 2022, but I wasn't really sure about it. I sort of started training on my own, and then I started going to the same physio as Ned Brockman because I was lucky enough to get a chance to meet him very early on in my running career, and he's sort of another person who inspired me to want to push my own boundaries. So I remember sitting there just talking to him at his house having lunch, and he was telling me he was going to run 4,000 kilometres. And I was sitting there going, this bloke's off his head. Like, how's he going to do that? And
I don't think I've walked 4,000 kilometres in my life.
And he said something to me which stuck, and to this very day, he said, you know, when your reason why is bigger than your reason to quit, you'll never quit. And it stuck with me, but it wasn't until I set myself these sort of tasks that it truly, those words meant their weight in gold to me. And I truly understand it to this day. And so I started going to the same physio as him and met some really amazing people there. Shout out to Harry Lord, who now lives in Berlin, but we had a lot of good sessions together. And then he then put me on to Ned's running coach, Matty Abel, who's been amazing. And we've been working together since the middle of 2023 towards this massive goal, but hopefully achievable goal.
So what about 6 months prep so far then?
So far, like, I've been running on my own for it. Like, I started, like I said, probably Jan, Feb, just running on my own. But with a sort of running coach, it's been about, 6. And then so hopefully we'll have nearly a year sort of working together by the time we get towards it.
So would you say Ned's been a big inspiration for you to do this then?
Yeah, definitely. Like, a lot of people who do these long distance events, they have been running for 10, 15 years. They've had a lot of years of repetition of pounding away at their body. But to see someone who, I don't know his full backstory, but potentially was sort of like I was, just wasting his life away, and decided to make positive change, and then went out. And it's very hard these days to really see an issue in the world and just on your own volition, on your own back, make a change. But he did. Raised millions of dollars, and he single-handedly changed a lot of people's lives. And seeing someone do that is very inspiring, and knowing that you have an ability yourself to do something, and having something that's dear to your heart, where it's very easy to want to put those things together and try and go out and make change in the world, in the community, or as simple as just one person's life would really be enough for me.
Well, it's funny. It's probably a good segue. We're having a bit of a chat this morning. You sort of filled me in because, again, I knew you were sunshine at Briars Rugby, and, you know, outwardly very positive, vibrant, bubbly. Now that we had that chat, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a second, but it's funny because all the sort of markers were there. So maybe you mentioned your story. I think it's very brave. You sort of messaged me a few weeks ago and said, no, I want to come on and talk. So first of all, talking to a mate's hard enough, but also in front of the world, essentially.
Shout out to all 7 billion people watching. Shout out to you.
I think it's 8 billion now, but that's all right. I don't want to make you uncomfortable on camera, sorry. It's easy to talk to a full room of people than an empty room. It's all good.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about your story then.
I think my story is one of normality. That's the one thing that I want to try and show to people. Like, a lot of people who don't know me or sort of see who I am today, like see the man who I'm really proud to be standing in front of people today, but they don't sort of see, like, I had, you know, a normalish childhood. Like, I'd say probably 50% of it has come from divorce, right? And I was very lucky enough to live with my mum, and my stepdad came in when I was 5, and they're both really amazing role models and have helped guide me to where I am today. But I still had a relationship with my biological dad, and it was sort of a bit back and forth, and, you know, he wasn't a perfect person. And it's a hard one. Like, I couldn't really tell you what I did 3 weeks ago, but I could tell you every time as a kid, you sit in the gutter waiting for someone to turn up to something that they never have. And as a little kid, when that's a parent, that's something that really, really crushes your self-worth and your self-confidence. And moving through life as a child and then into your adolescent years, it's very, very hard going into the world, constantly putting on a persona and constantly trying to be what everyone else wants you to be, and then getting home and you're almost in tears because it's just you're working, you're performing all day long when inside you're really broken.
Sort of masking.
Definitely, yeah, because you're afraid for someone to see what's inside, because if your own biological parent doesn't, why would anyone? So you're constantly, and when someone's your friend, you're almost surprised. You're like, why? Why do you want to be friends with me? Like, you are just so surprised that people can love what's inside you because someone who's biologically supposed to doesn't. But I think a lot of people go through those things, and that's one of the things, like, as a parent, most of the time you just have to be there. The kid doesn't need you to be superhero. They just need you to sort of be there for them. And that's definitely something that really affected me, like, through my adolescent years. And then going into sort of being like a teenager and in my early 20s, I unfortunately found drugs and alcohol, like, rather heavily. And for me, that was the warm hug and the shield from everything, because you could escape the reality that would torment you from day to day, and you didn't have to put on this persona because you were just lucid. You weren't really who you were. And unfortunately, that can very easily become your whole personality. And I think in Australia especially, we have a large drinking culture, and it's very, very personified for someone to be like that, especially a bloke in their early 20s. And
Definitely not at Bry's, though.
definitely not at Bry's Rugby, but drink responsibly. But that can very easily become your whole personality, and that's how you're known to everyone, is that guy that just always drinks too much and does too much stuff. But he's a lot of fun, it's good to have him around, but yeah, that can very easily sort of become what you're known for and who you are.
And sort of how old are we talking you started getting into alcohol and illicit substance?
Probably like 16 or 17, realistically. I probably like dabbled, and then it was, that's a slippery slope. And then by the time I was in my early 20s, it was probably pretty significant part of like who I was. And
I'm
then
assuming we're talking fairly heavy stuff as well, like...
Yeah, definitely. And then, but it's a hard one for me. Like I did it for a very extended period of time, but I can hand on my heart say that I was never really addicted to the drugs. I was addicted to the escape, because once I finally was able to see the light and want to create positive change, I was able just to cut those things out without withdrawal symptoms, because I was never craving the drug. I was craving escaping from people.
It wasn't a chemical addiction per se. It was more,
It was just escaping, like I said, the reality that was tormenting me.
And when you say the reality that was tormenting you, is that stuff from childhood, or was that from your day-to-day stuff, and I guess the continual having to put on the act rather than being able to be yourself?
I think like definitely the childhood stuff, like it was really affecting me, what happened with my dad, and then biological dad, and then he had trouble with the law and he had to flee the country and he went to jail, and then he come out and he had really bad substance issues because of that. And look, that's his life, right? And the worst part for me was I tried to live every day never wanting to be like anything like him, and I was doing my best to do everything like him. Funny how that works, isn't it? And that was the thing, right? You have a low self-worth and you put yourself in a situation where you're trying to do everything to appease people, but then you're constantly doing these negative things that then lowers your self-worth, and then it's just this vicious cycle that just keeps going.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It is a vicious cycle. There's a lot of people call it a downward spiral. Like, how deep are we talking into that?
I mean, as deep as it really can get to still be sitting here in front of you. Alcohol and drugs became, every day I would be drinking 8 to 10 beers every single day just to get through the day, and then you'd be doing drugs probably at least once during the week, and then on the weekend it would be very, very heavily. And then you just do it all again every week, and then I was battling with really bad anxiety and depression for a while, but I just never really thought it was real. And then it took until I was at the doctor's with my stepdad, and you have to fill out this Kessler form, and it's like the top rating's 50 out of it. And I think I was like a 42 in terms of like anxiety and depression levels. And it was just sort of like, for me, seeing it on paper, seeing those numbers in the cold light of day made me realize that something was going on, but I still didn't elicit any change in my life. But that sort of made me realize that, hey, maybe there is actually something going on more than what I believed.
So what was the breaking point that you went and actually said, something isn't right, I need to do something about it and fix it? What was that moment?
It's funny, in life, like I was lucky enough to still find myself into a long-term relationship, and she was an amazing girl and I really, really loved her. But the problem with having a really low self-worth is I loved her so much more than I ever loved myself. And in a relationship, the person you have to love the most is always yourself, because then if you don't, you're never going to be the right person for your partner, and you're never going to be the right person for yourself. And it took for us, like we were about to get engaged and buy a house, and it took for when she dumped me, and took for my house of cards to fall down. And I finally wasn't leaning on everyone else anymore. I was able to lean on people and feel sorry for myself. Oh, poor me, but someone would make me feel better. It was until there was no one else around. Everyone had gone, and I had to look myself in the mirror, and that's when the crescendo for change came, because I realized that I'm better than this. I'm so much better than the person I'm leading the life of, but I'm doing nothing to facilitate that change. So how do you want to go about making yourself better?
I think it's funny that you mentioned, I think a lot of people, especially with the history that you sort of described, would have seen a moment like that and gone, yeah, okay, this is my destiny now. I'm just going to dive headfirst back into the pit. The fact that you were able to sort of go, okay, now I've got to turn around, And I think when we discuss potentially running Brisbane to Sydney, I think that sort of shows your character. Would you describe yourself as someone who really has to bounce back from adversity?
Yeah, I think that's always been a trait that's in me. Like, I've always believed in working hard and really believing in yourself, but I did nothing to back that up, you know. And
until then, obviously.
Yeah, like I maybe did it in spades. I did it for short periods of time, but I never really did it for a long period of time. But I never really needed to. Like I said, I was always willing and was good at finding someone to lean on, to never really have to bounce back on my own.
So how did you pull yourself up by your bootstraps then? Because this is obviously a change that you've had to find within yourself.
Yeah.
You're saying you couldn't use other people, I think before you said as crutches.
Yeah.
And, you know, sort of having to, well, I'm hanging upside down, I better do a press up, you know, like.
It was just during the COVID period. Like, I remember one day, like, I've always been a skinny-ish dude, but I looked myself in the mirror and I was just white and pasty and had a bit of a gut, and I was like, man, you're gross. What are you
What's
doing?
wrong with that?
And I just decided that, look, I need to go out and try and do something, but the gyms were all shut during COVID. So I went out and started running some very, very brutal 5Ks where it was a lot of walking, a lot of throwing up. But I was lucky enough just to fall in love with it and sort of just kept sticking to it and, you know, running and running and running, just whatever it was, whether it was a 5K, maybe it was less, whatever I was able to do. And it didn't have to be some superhuman feat. It just had to be a continued change in my life of a little bit of positivity each day that I was trying to do for myself.
It's funny you said a little bit of positivity, because I think a lot of people go into the challenge 950Ks, Brisbane to Sydney, and they go, oh yeah, I've got to do this big grandiose thing. But you're saying you didn't even mind if it wasn't a 5K.
Yeah.
So I guess, how do you keep yourself, I guess, focused on the bigger picture rather than just what's in front of you? Because this is, again, something we talked about before was, you know, some people have to do the big things right away and have to get what they want now. How did you stay patient and keep working from that 5K to now, obviously, long distance?
Yeah, well, I guess at the time, I never had these ideas of grandeur of trying to do something like this, but I was very lucky in that I did have the mindset of I was going to tick off these boxes incrementally. But I also realized very early on that I didn't need to do this grand thing, but all I needed to do was stop trying to prove everyone else right and start to prove myself right. You know, I mean, I wasn't doing this for anyone else. I needed to just finally cut out a lot of outside noise and stop caring about what people thought about me and start doing these things for myself. And once you wake up every day and you make a promise to yourself that you're going to go do something, and you continually do those things, whether it's going to the gym or whether it's going for a walk every morning or whatever it is, right? Your self-confidence levels will skyrocket when you just continually prove yourself right day after day after day. And then you can build off that. But if you go from nothing to trying to dive head first into something when you have no past experience in it, it can be very easy to be scarred by it and never come back to it.
So you'd say this is more a journey of self-improvement rather than, say, achieving a massive feat?
Definitely. I think we all have so much self-improvement left in us, and then we always do. Like, I think it's not a destination. Life is a journey, and that's something that I always used to think about. Like, it was just a destiny. I need to get to this and I'll be happy. I need to get this and I'll be happy. It's not that. There is something you can take from every single day. And I don't know when my last day is going to be, and I'm not going to sit around waiting for it to come. You know, I truly believe in this journey, however long this crazy roller coaster of life's going to be for me. I truly believe that I'm going to take everything from every single day that I can.
So would you say that this is sort of the actual run itself is more a means to self-improvement rather than self-improvement being a means to a 950K run?
Yeah, definitely. And look, I can't lie. Like, for me, a massive reason that I want to do this run is to inspire other people. But I can't lie and selfishly say that there's not a massive thing that I want to take out of this run as well. I want to prove to myself that I have no quit. And if I put my mind and I say I'm going to do something and I want to do it, that I'll go and do it. So there is so much self-improvement that I'm going to take out of this run. But on top of that, I really just want to inspire people to see someone who, look, Brisbane to City is never supposed to be the most amazing physical feat that anyone's ever done. It's not about that. And I think it's better because of that, because it's just someone who's honestly going out and is pushing their limitations to their absolute best and is going to do everything they can to facilitate that. And I think that's what a lot of people can take inspiration from, that, you know, it's by large, just an average kind of guy. You know, not too long ago was a guy down the pub who go, oh, look at that guy.
Was a guy scoring tries all over Sydney and making defenses look silly. But in all fairness, and we sort of talked about, again, we talked about this before, you don't really call yourself an athlete, but it's a massive, I think, athletic feat. I mean, we look at marathon runners, right? And I think it's, 42K is a marathon. And that's impressive. And you're doing something 20 times that scale. I think you're selling yourself a little bit short that it's not this massive, massive feat. But we're talking interstate running. I can't even fathom the amount of planning you must have to be putting in, not only to make sure that you're physically ready, but the routes you're going to take, the way that you're going to approach each day, because it's going to be like a rally in a sense. You're not going to be running non-stop. It's going to be, one stage in one day. And then you said, I think 100 Ks a day is your aim.
Yeah.
We're talking, 2.5 marathons in one day. And you're saying that's not the most impressive feat. I think you're selling yourself a little bit short.
Well, I do think it's impressive, but I'll never consider myself as an athlete and what I try and do as an athlete. Like, I truly believe that some of us are born as warriors and it's inside us. And I think the world we live in these days, we do a very good job of having to suppress that and never needing to bring it out. But I believe there are some of us who are born warriors and it's inside us. And it takes something like this to really invigorate us and bring that out inside of us. But I'm not trying to be the greatest athlete in the world, but I want to be a warrior who's never going to give up. And that's the thing I want to inspire to other people. But it's definitely, there is a physical element to it. Like when I got into running, I thought I would help my physical fitness a little bit running these 5Ks. And I was very naive to think that the garbage fire that was my life was really going to be changed by those 5Ks. And yet it changed my whole life. The person, the mind, the soul that sits in front of you today is completely changed because of running. And I'm so grateful for that, but it's got nothing to do with physical fitness. It's armor plated my mind to the point where I know I'm never going to give up and I know how much it means to me. And I know I truly want it more, like so much more than it's ever going to hurt me. So you can say it's an athletic feat, but I know it's just a feat of a warrior who's never going to give up until he gets his goal.
You're saying it's more about mental toughness than physical. So how are you conditioning yourself now mentally to face what I think you'll at least admit is a challenge?
Definitely. It's definitely a challenge.
I mean, don't let me put words in your mouth. You might be thinking, oh, it's a breeze, 100 Ks a day, it's fine. But how do you prepare your mind for what is going to be physically taxing?
For me, the greatest thing I've done was remove listening to music when I run. I used to listen to music and it's really good, but you can use the music as a crutch as well. The songs can get you through certain things. And for me, it was like 2 weeks out from my first ever 100K ultra. I decided to stop listening to music and then I went 13 hours straight with no music. And we live in a world where there's so much technology and so many things that are trying to grab our attention really quickly. And then it's very easy to just sit down and be with your own thoughts for 5 minutes. Try it. Try to go sit at home and get rid of your phone, get rid of everything. Just try and sit with thoughts for 5 minutes. It can get weird, I promise you.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're running for 13 hours straight, and we're trying to run 100 kilometers, and the route I was doing, it was a 6.25K out and back. So you just out, back, out, back, out, back. You go through some pretty weird things, but you also realize how strong our mind is and that we've let this tool, it's why I don't think of it as a physical feat, otherwise mental. We've let this tool, which is so much stronger than our bodies will ever be, go dormant. But, being able to find that and just harness it. And for me, it's just sitting with it, being able to just sit and run, of course, but I just like to sit with my mind and just think about different things. And then I'm just constantly training it to be ready for the next thing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a run for ready to something that maybe life's going to throw at me.
So are you sort of switching off the run in your head, or are you fully present and sort of shutting everything but the run off?
You go through phases. For me, I call it mental rooms. So when I'm running, I have rooms where you sit in and you have to remove yourself from, and sometimes you don't get the choice. So sometimes you're sitting in a room that's really painful and you need to find a way to remove yourself from that room, or sometimes you're sitting in a room which is really nice and you're just coasting, you're loving it, and you get pulled out of it. But you go through these mental rooms and you got to go through these doors, and sometimes you're in a hurt locker and you've just got to get through it, and sometimes it's just bliss and it feels like it's meditation and Zen.
So it's very much compartmentalizing, I guess, as well. And I guess being aware that you're going to go through the change, because with physical, you can build up your running endurance, you can build up your stamina. I guess with mental, it really is, you're not going around the wall, you're going through it. You sort of have to go to that place.
Yeah, you have. You have to go to some pretty dark places because, you're 100% right. You can't go around these things. Some things you just got to tackle head on. And some people these days, we're not equipped to do it and we crumble. And I know I've been there. I've been through hard things previously in my life and I haven't been ready to tackle it head on. And I've tried to go around it and you can't.
Do you ever think you've had, just on that, you've talked about the lows. Have you ever reached, I guess, the opposite order of magnitude in the highs? Or is that sort of what you're hoping to find through running?
It's a hard one. Like I've always believed I was destined for greatness my whole life. I've always truly believed that, but I've never found that thing. I've done a few things that I've been okay at, like I played rugby and I was good at it, but that was from just sheer grit and determination. There was not a high skill level, but I know I wanted it more than anyone else on that field. That's sort of what it came down to. And
it's always the small ones, that's why, isn't it?
But back in life, I hated running. I hated running at rugby training. I hated everything about it. I was never that fit when it came to running. And there wasn't too many other things in life that I was particularly bad at, but I never excelled. And it wasn't until I found this, and I've definitely found my outlet for change in the world.
It's funny that you mentioned you hated running, considering you were a winger, and pretty much all you're going to ever do on a rugby field is a winger, because you're not going to be scrummaging. You're certainly
not sticking this head in a scrum.
You're not going to go up in the lineouts. It's almost like you're punishing yourself, but it's in a good way. It's very strange when you sort of talk about it. I hated running. And now you've said you've done ultra marathons, you're doing this massive thing. Why is it so important to you then now, considering how much you hated it?
Like the alone time is something that you can't compare it generally. The alone time I get from running is something that has really changed my life. Like being able to sit there and have no distractions in life, I think it happens anymore. To be able to sit there and just have that time to truly sit with it and know that every single step I'm taking in the right direction is 2 steps away from the wrong direction. And I guess knowing where I came from, I was in a really bad place, which, there was things in my life, but I was doing the best possible chance I could to piss my life away. Like I was doing that myself. So, every now and again I sit, and I don't like to sit on it too much, but I just sit and reflect to how proud of myself I am. And if that comes from me running another 100K, then I'll just keep running another 100K, because it's a hard thing. It's the hard right rather than the easy wrong, which I think a lot of us choose these days because that's just what we're programmed to.
That hard right, easy wrong, where have you picked that up from? Because that is, I think, something so many people struggle with. I think especially these days now that, again, we were talking before about like social media, and now you can see it's not just peeking over the neighbour's fence. You're constantly being bombarded with what everyone else is doing around you, only getting the positive. Just what for you makes you really want to put the work in? Is it that desire to just have that deep sense of fulfillment, or is it something else?
Like I said, I truly believed that I was going to do something great in the world. I never knew what it was. And I feel so lucky that I found running, and that's why I will continue to put the work in so I'm able to do something like this run. And, I would love it to facilitate change in as many people's lives as possible, right? But like I said, I would take it to be one person, because I know what it feels like to be in that state where your mind's doing its best to tell you that you're not worth being here anymore. And it's hard. Like a lot of people, when they take their own lives, people will say how selfish it is. But those people, I promise you, have never been in that situation, because they don't understand it's the hardest thing in the world every day not to do it. You battle every single day, every single second not to do something like that, because you truly believe that it's easier for everyone else if you're not here. And I know what that feels like, and it's really hard to wake up every day and feel like that. And if I can help just one person that's going through that and show them that they are so worthy of the love that they deny themselves of, and it's the reason that I'm sitting here right now. It's the reason I'm going to run this 1,000K.
And so I'm assuming that you've dealt with that sort of thing before, with yourself, with others around you.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like I told you, the crescendo for change was me being alone. Like I got to a stage where I had to take myself to hospital because I was going to take my own life. But because I still had my partner around, even that wasn't, I still didn't change after that. You know, I was in there and I sat in a white room for 12 hours and they take your shoelaces and everything off you. And I had to see my parents come and my mum's there like looking at me, and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and you know, she's trying to understand what's happened from the child that she knows and the happy-go-lucky kid. She's trying to see what's sitting in front of her. And yet even then, even after that, I still didn't change. And it's just funny how, like I said, because I had a little crutch, I had someone to prop me up, I just never dealt with this issue.
And it's funny because, again, on surface value, and obviously from a place of ignorance or, you know, sort of being oblivious, you would never have picked that for someone like you. And I think that goes to show that the importance of reaching out to people around you, it's so important because everyone's got their own battles. And
sure.
We were talking about, you know, a physical injury you can see. You can see you know, if someone's on crutches, if someone's in a moon boot, if they're in a wheelchair, you go, okay, well, you know, there's obviously something there. With mental health, it's so difficult. And you admitted that you were masking before. So it's almost like you didn't want people to know, but then the truth always comes out when you hit that rock bottom and you're you know, in a white room. How important is it then in terms of, we'll focus mainly on men, but just men's mental health and the awareness and breaking down the stigmas and taboos?
I guess what I want to try and help is that, you know, we live, it's definitely getting a lot better these days, but we still live in a society where to be, like, if I asked you what you'd considered a strong man is, you'd probably say some big muscly guy, right? And I want to create a generation of new strong men who, a strong man or a strong woman is someone who is able to sit down and understand that vulnerability is true strength. To be able to sit down with someone and not be afraid to show what's inside of you, not be afraid to show the things that make it really hard and you struggle each day from, because you don't know, you have no idea the exponential growth you can facilitate in someone by just being a little bit vulnerable and showing them that it's totally okay to be like that around people.
And I guess then, like, what would be your recommended way of like reaching out to a mate?
I think it's just as easy as, you know, coming down to your local place, like potentially Briar Sports, and just having a beer or a glass of water, whatever you need in your life, and just talking to someone. Like, so many of us, we have all these things that rattle around in our heads, but we don't have the proper place to think about it. And we have all these distractions and we never get a clear mind. We never get the clarity to think about it. And the ideas and the scenarios we make up in our head are always 10 times worse than the outcome is ever going to be. And sometimes it's just as simple as sitting down with someone that you trust. That's not going to be a yes man or a yes woman and it's going to give you the answers you don't want to hear. He's going to tell you the hard truths rather than the easy wrongs. But and just being honest with them and not being afraid to be vulnerable.
How much did having, I guess, a collective that you belong to in Briars, was that a help or a hindrance? Because I'd imagine from what you've sort of said, it's enabling you because that club culture of, you know, amounts of alcohol, won't go into detail, but amounts of alcohol. But then again, the flip side is that you've got a group of, in your case, young men around you, whereas I think for a lot of older blokes, it's the RSL club or the local workers club. You know, did that help or hinder?
I think it's a combination of both. I came down to Briars when I was 18. I moved to the area when I was 15 from Western Sydney. And I didn't move here for school, so I still travel back to school. So I didn't have a lot of friends in the area. And I came to Briars off a whim. I met a guy who my dad played cricket with and he suggested I came down. So I came down, didn't know anyone. And I've met some of the best friends of my whole life down here. And yes, I can't lie and say that it did facilitate a lot of negativity in my life, but sometimes you have to put your hand up and say that I'm an adult as well. And yeah, you can be in the wrong situation, but that doesn't mean you have to do the wrong thing. It's very...
Taking that personal responsibility for your actions.
Exactly right, which I didn't do. I was the first one to see whatever the boys wanted me to do, and I was the guy that went and did it. So there was a lot of negative aspects that came from it, but I met some of the best people that I've ever met in my whole life and friends that I'll have to this day. And I was just lucky in that I've never been afraid to, as I've got older, to share my story on the drink. Because I think that's one thing that helps it come out, unfortunately. I was one of those guys who was very easy to share the things I went through after I've had a couple of drinks. And then I was able to tell people the truth about what was really going on inside. And, I was lucky enough that was able to help a lot of people and help a lot of my good friends to want to show their own vulnerability that they've kept inside. And now that I live a much more positive lifestyle, I'm totally okay with doing that completely sober, which I think the biggest thing I want to try and show to people is just be able to have balance. I'm not saying you don't have to drink at all, but if you can drink in moderation, you can change your life massively as well.
I'm going to ask about the t-shirt, Heart on My Sleeve. Tell us a little bit about them.
It's funny, like when I was playing for Bryce, I always actually used to draw a heart on my wrist because that, like I said, it was never skill that was going to get me across the line. It was just going to be heart and grit.
Yeah, debatable, but...
And so I was obviously tossing up...
In a positive way, sorry. In a positive way.
Yeah. I was obviously tossing up and trying to find the right charity, and obviously it's something that's really got to be very personal. And, it makes sense once you have a crisis issue, which was suicide. There's a lot of charities which are very fixated on specifically suicide. But I think once you start fixing the issue, you then need to work back from the issue, which they have a holistic approach to your positive mental health, whether it be positive, neutral, or, in crisis mode. And hopefully people not wanting to just share when things are getting bad, just to share when, if they're starting to notice little things in their mind. So I think that's one massive thing, just people being completely open to their holistic mental health. And then I just love a lot of people just post on there and they just share their raw story. And I think that's a massive thing for growth in people's lives, is just seeing someone else who is going through something that was similar to you, and it makes you realize that you're not crazy, there's nothing wrong with you. Look at all these people who are sharing, being very vulnerable and sharing their story.
Started to become a lot more prominent. Again, it's still not the easiest thing to sort of, I think, open up with. It is becoming more prominent thanks to associations like Heart on My Sleeve and groups like that. I mean, as I said, I think it's very brave for you to, not only because, again, I don't want to be presumptuous, but I'm assuming the reason that you asked me to come and help you do this was because I was someone you could trust, or a mate or someone like that.
Definitely.
But also opening this conversation up, like we're sort of privileged, we're in a room that's isolated and away from everyone, but then peeling back the curtain again with the cameras here, I think that's very brave. Would you say it is braver to say run 950 Ks or to actually be honest with who you are?
I think the latter. For me, I am much more afraid to sit here and talk about this as opposed to running 950K. But I think there is going to be so much more growth that can be taken from this than me running that 950K. I truly believe in. Sometimes you need to be that pioneer and you need to be willing to step out and show people the way. And I think that can be done by people. Like, you don't have to go out and run 950K. I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm not saying you have to go and do some extraordinary feat, but you just have, the biggest thing is just, for me, is every single day I wake up and want to be better than I was yesterday. And that's one thing I want to show to people, the exponential growth you can find in your life by just wanting to be better than you were, not anyone else. Don't try and be better than someone else. Just try and be better than yourself.
It's good. It's good to come full circle back to that. Before we start to wrap up, would you say that there is like a good fear and a bad fear? Because you touched on it before, like you were a bit more afraid of opening up. But I guess there's also a certain amount of fear that naturally occurs when you challenge yourself, when you challenge stigmas, when you bear yourself, I guess, in a way that leaves you quite vulnerable.
Yeah, I think for sure. Putting yourself in these situations and doing hard things, and a lot of the time not being successful, that's where you learn most in life, right? It's very easy to want to sit in your comfort zone because that's what we all love doing, and you put a warm blanket around yourself and it's nice. But putting yourself in these situations, that's where you're going to grow the most, and that's where you're going to really show other people how much you can grow as well. And yeah, I think there definitely is, but I think it's all about finding balance and intertwining those two things and finding the correct balance between them in every facet of your life is what it's all about.
So down to the nitty gritty, it's, come May, how do people support you? Who's currently supporting you? And, what would you like people to do, I guess, in terms of this run for you?
So obviously the charity that I'm doing it for is Heart on My Sleeve, so everyone can go onto their page and follow them. And obviously there'll be a link in the description to the donation page. So anyone that can donate to the charity would be amazing. But also, more than just the money to the charity, like the main reason I'm doing that is that I want to facilitate change in people's lives. So, being able for someone just to see someone out there trying to do something like beyond their capability levels, to maybe want to push their own boundaries and trying to facilitate growth and be better in their lives. And then I'm very lucky. So at the moment, Briar Sports, which has a very, very dear place in my heart, is sponsoring the run. So there'll be a few upcoming charity and fundraising events through them, which giving back to, more than just raising money, trying to give back to the community here, which means so much to me, would be amazing as well. And there'll be a few other ways to donate in the link below.
Fantastic. Any chance that you run through the tape in Sydney and you just keep going to Melbourne, or you're going to take a bit of time? You're going to take a bit of time off before you say run, Sydney to Auckland or something like you.
I think once I get through the Opera House, which I know I'm going to get there, I think once I get there, the running shoes are definitely going to come off for a couple of days, probably because I can't walk. But I think there'll be a good bit of time off, but then there'll be something else I want to challenge myself for, because this is my purpose in life. This is what I'm supposed to do, and I can't wait for however many days I get left on this planet to keep trying to do things like this and inspire people.
It's very brave of you not just to talk about this, but to, I guess, walk the talk as well, or run in your case. But 950 Ks, it's a massive challenge. I mean, again, I've been lucky enough to know you for a few years now, and obviously there's been a lot of growth in that time, and I think it's really exciting. I think it's really brave, and I think it's really great, and I can't wait to watch you cross through the tape and run all the way down to Docklands or something. But honestly, just keep in touch, keep posting on socials, and get people behind your cause, because it is a great cause. Lachy, fantastic to talk with you today. I wish you nothing but the best, and I look forward to seeing not only this run, Brisbane to Sydney, finishing at the Opera House, but also whatever comes in the future. Thanks so much, mate.
Thanks very much, mate. I'll see you, mate.